A poor girl holds a doll and says to the billionaire, "Are we born to be loved or do we have to earn it? Because my mum left me." And when he sees the name written on the doll, he falls to his knees. Elliot Vance woke up at 5:12 a.m. He always woke up before the alarm. His body had learned to save time, even when his mind didn't know what to do with the extra hours. The penthouse apartment was far too big for one man, 11 rooms of meticulously organized silence. Through the window, the city was still asleep. Sparse lights blinked like fallen stars. Elliot made his coffee the same way he had for 12 years. Strong, no sugar, in the same navy blue mug. His routine was a well-calibrated clock. Another day, he murmured to no one. At 42, Elliot had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. Fortune magazine had put him on the cover 3 times. They called him the Food King. His company, Vance Nutrition, dominated the market with a product line ranging from breakfast cereals to high-end frozen meals. In shareholder meetings, his silent presence intimidated more than any shout. In the marble bathroom, he looked at the mirror as if searching for a familiar stranger. His dark hair now had strands of grey at the temples. Fine lines marked the corners of his eyes. They weren't laugh lines, they were marks of empty time. While shaving, his cell phone rang. It was Janet, his executive assistant of 8 years. She never called before 7 unless it was urgent. Elliot answered on the second ring. "Mr. Vance, sorry for calling so early. We have a situation at the Somerset factory. Factory issues were nothing new. Machines break down, employees fall ill, suppliers run late." But something in Janet's voice sounded different. "A storm damaged part of the roof last night. Nothing serious for production. We can fix it by tomorrow, but the water reached the community center next door. The orphanage, sir." Elliot paused, the razor still on his face. The orphanage. He had seen the structure on his last visit to the factory, a simple red brick building with a small playground. At the time, he had only mentally noted that his company could make a donation at the end of the fiscal year, something for the social responsibility report. "What's the extent of the damage?" he asked, drying his face with a towel. "Part of the dining hall is unusable. Nothing structural, but the kids have nowhere to eat. There are 28 children, sir." 28. A small number for someone used to dealing with millions every day. Elliot thought of last quarter's profits, $372 million, and how that number had never felt so abstract as it did at that moment. Send a repair team and provide meals for everyone until their dining area is back in operation. I already took that initiative, sir. The crew will arrive in an hour. Janet knew him well, perhaps better than he knew himself. There was a pause on the line. "Is there anything else, Janet?" "Actually," she hesitated, a rare thing in her usual efficiency. "The director of the orphanage, Mrs. Hollis, asked if someone from the company could come in person to assess the situation. Apparently, the children are scared because of the storm and the damage. She mentioned that having someone there, well, it would help calm them." Elliot felt something strange in his chest, a slight pressure, discomfort, guilt. In his rare public appearances, he limited himself to cutting ribbons, shaking hands, and giving speeches written by his PR team. He had never been good at warmth or closeness, not after Maisie. "Send the regional manager, or someone from public relations." "They're at the conference in San Diego, sir. You sent them yourself, remember?" Of course he remembered. His business memory was impeccable. "I can go tomorrow," he said, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. "I have important meetings today." Another pause on the line. Janet never questioned his decisions, but this time her voice carried something rare. "Sir, with all due respect, these are children who lost the place where they eat. Some have lost more than that in life. Your presence would make a difference today." Elliot stopped moving his hands on his tie. A sudden image invaded his mind. Maisie sitting on the kitchen floor, porridge smeared on her face, laughing while he pretended to be a lake monster. He was 16, she was 5. The last happy memory before she vanished. "Cancel my morning appointments," he said, surprising even himself. "I'll be at the factory in 2 hours." The trip to Somerset was silent. His driver, Marcus, knew when not to interrupt his boss's thoughts. Through the car window, Elliot watched the scenery change, skyscrapers giving way to suburbs, then to open fields dotted with the occasional factory. His mind, however, was elsewhere. In recent months, he'd been followed by a growing restlessness. During board meetings, business dinners, and the lonely nights in his apartment, a void echoed, unfilled by money. A silence that grew louder each day. The therapist he'd seen, discreetly, so no one at the company would know, called it a midlife crisis. Elliot thought the label was too simplistic. It wasn't just a temporary dissatisfaction or a desire for change. It was a hunger for meaning, growing like a silent wave. Marcus interrupted his thoughts. "We're here, sir. The factory is on the right. The orphanage is that brick building just beyond." Elliot straightened his jacket as he got out of the car. The factory was a modern, efficient structure, one of dozens he owned across the country. But his gaze was drawn to the building next door. Older, smaller, with tall windows and a yard where a few children were playing under the supervision of two women. The factory manager, Stevens, was already waiting for him at the gate. His face showed poorly disguised surprise at the unexpected visit from the CEO. "Mr. Vance, what an honor to have you here. We weren't expecting, usually you let us know in advance. I came to see the damage to the orphanage," Elliot said, cutting through any formalities. "How bad is it?" Stevens briefed him as they walked. The storm the previous night had been the worst in the region in 15 years. The factory, modern and well-built, had only superficial damage. But the orphanage, with its older structure, hadn't been as lucky. The water damaged the electrical system in the dining hall. It also ruined some of the kitchen equipment. Our team is already working on it, but it'll take at least 3 days. 3 days is unacceptable, Elliot said, stopping mid-stride. "I want this fixed by tomorrow." "Sir, with all due respect, it's physically impossible. Double the crew, bring in specialists, pay overtime, do whatever it takes." Stevens swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." When they reached the orphanage, they were met by a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a simple bun and kind but tired eyes. She wore a name tag that read, "Margaret Hollis, Director." "Mr. Vance, what a surprise to have you here in person. I'm Margaret Hollis." Elliot shook her hand briefly. "I came to assess the damage and ensure everything is restored as quickly as possible." The woman's eyes lit up. "That's very kind of you. The children are having breakfast in the activity room now. We improvised some tables there. Your company already sent meals this morning, which was a blessing." Margaret led him down the main hallway. The smell of dampness mixed with disinfectant filled the air. On the walls, colorful drawings made by children were hung on improvised clotheslines. One depicted what looked like a rainbow over a house. Another showed a stick-figure family smiling. "How many children live here?" Elliot asked, surprised by his own interest. 28 at the moment, from 18 months to 17 years old. Some are here temporarily. Others, well, they grow up here." Upon arriving at the activity room, Elliot saw low tables where children of various ages were eating. Some laughed, others spoke quietly. A few simply ate in silence, looking down at their plates. The normalcy of the scene contrasted with the abnormality of their lives. An assistant approached Margaret and whispered something in her ear. The director nodded. "I need to resolve a quick matter. Feel free to meet the children. They love visitors." Elliot almost protested. He wasn't good with kids. He didn't know what to say or how to act. But before he could respond, Margaret was already gone, leaving him alone in an ocean of curious stares. Some of the older kids watched him warily. A boy of about 12 whispered something to a girl beside him, and they both snickered. Elliot felt out of place, like he was in a foreign country without knowing the language. That's when he noticed, in a more distant corner, a small girl sitting by herself. Unlike the others, she wasn't eating. She just held something against her chest, what seemed to be a worn-out doll. Her large, dark eyes stared at him with a piercing intensity that unsettled him. Without quite knowing why, Elliot walked toward her. Maybe because, in the midst of the noisy room, the silence around her felt familiar. "Hello," he said, feeling strangely nervous. The girl didn't reply. She kept looking at him, as if seeing beyond the surface. "You're not eating," he tried again, pointing to the untouched plate in front of her. "I'm not hungry," she finally said. Her voice was soft but oddly mature. "Food can wait. Other things can't." Elliot raised his eyebrows, surprised. It wasn't the kind of answer you'd expect from a child so young. "What kinds of things can't wait?" "Important questions," she replied, adjusting the doll in her arms. It was a simple rag doll with faded clothes and no hair. "And what questions are those?" The girl hesitated, as if evaluating whether he was worthy of hearing them. Then, with a seriousness that didn't match her size, she asked, "Are we born to be loved, or do we have to earn it? Because my mom left me." The question hit Elliot like a punch to the stomach. He felt his body tense, as if every muscle had frozen at once. It wasn't just the depth of the question from someone so young. It was as though she had reached a place inside him no one else could touch, a place guarded by layers and layers of emotional distance. Then his eyes fell to the doll in her arms, and the world around him seemed to disappear. On the doll's cloth belly, stitched with childish, uneven letters, was a name Elliot hadn't seen in more than 3 decades. A name that belonged to nightmares, locked memories, to a pain that had never really healed. Maisie. The air left his lungs as though an invisible hand was squeezing them. His knees gave out, and he found himself collapsing in front of the girl, grabbing the edge of the table to keep from falling completely. "Sir, are you okay?" The girl's voice sounded distant, as if coming from another world. In Elliot's mind, images overlapped in a whirlwind. The backyard of his childhood home, the high-pitched laugh of a 5-year-old girl, the same bald doll being hugged by different arms, and then the void, the silence, the absence that defined his entire adult life. "Your doll," was all he could say, his voice almost a whisper. What is her name?" The girl looked at the toy affectionately, then back at Elliot. "Maisie. My mom picked that name before she left." Elliot felt the world spin. A coincidence. It had to be. But the details. The same name stitched the same way. A bald rag doll identical to the one his sister never let go. "What's your name?" he asked, struggling to regain control. "Lila," the girl replied. "I'm 4.5. 4. The same age Maisie was when—" "Lila," Margaret Hollis's voice came from behind them. "I see you've met Mr. Vance." Elliot stood up, still dazed. His mind was racing, trying to process what he had just seen, what he had just felt. "That girl, Lila, how long has she been here?" Margaret looked surprised by the question. "Lila arrived about 6 months ago. Her mother passed away after a long illness." "And the mother's name?" The director frowned, clearly puzzled by his sudden interest. "Margot Leary. She left Lila with us shortly before she died. No other relatives." Margaret paused. "Mr. Vance, are you all right?" "You look pale." Elliot glanced again at Lila, at the doll, at the stitched name that seemed to blink like a beacon in the darkness. "I'm fine," he lied, "just tired." But he wasn't fine. For the first time in decades, the meticulously constructed silence around him had been shattered. And in the middle of the noise, a single question echoed. What if? Elliot did not return to the office that day. He cancelled all remaining meetings and drove to the beach, a place he rarely visited. He needed space, air, an open horizon, something that contrasted with the tightness in his chest. Sitting on the sand, he held a seashell between his fingers, rotating it repeatedly. He couldn't get the image of the doll in Lila's arms out of his mind. Maisie. A name he hadn't spoken aloud in over 30 years. A name he carried with him like a broken object in his pocket, its sharp edges still cutting him. "Get the blue shell, Eli. The blue one." The childish voice came so clearly that he turned his head, looking for its source. But there was only an elderly couple walking in the distance and seagulls slicing the sky. The memory arrived like a wave, pulling him under. Suddenly he wasn't on the beach anymore. He was in another time, another place. The backyard of the house where he'd grown up was spacious, with a small garden and a cherry tree in the corner. Elliot was 16 that summer and felt too grown up for childish games. He had friends waiting, maybe a girl who liked him, important plans for a Saturday that promised to be perfect. But his mother had to leave for an emergency medical appointment. His father was on a business trip, and Maisie, 5 years old and endlessly energetic, was left in his care. "Eli, let's play restaurant. I'll make pretend food." Elliot sighed, checking the clock. His friends were probably already at the lake. "I can't right now, Maisie. I have to finish my homework." It was a lie. There was no homework over the summer. He just wanted her to leave him alone, to let him do his own thing without being stuck with her and her ball doll. "I can help you with your homework, Eli. I can write my whole name now." There was pride in her small voice. Brown hair in messy curls, one front tooth missing, overalls with dirt on the knees, eyes that believed her older brother could fix anything broken in the world. "Go play in the yard, Maisie. Just for a bit. I promise I'll play with you later." Another lie. He planned to slip out as soon as he could. 16 years old, with more important places to be and people to see. "You really promise, Eli?" "I promise. Now go." He watched her run toward the garden, the ball doll dragging in the dirt, swinging from her small hand. Maisie knelt by the sunflowers, picking bits of grass and lining them up. She was making a little farm for her doll. She seemed engrossed enough. Elliot went upstairs, grabbed a few dollars from a shoebox, and climbed out the back window using the old oak tree for support, a maneuver he'd practiced many times before. He didn't intend to stay out long. He just wanted to meet up with his friends briefly, prove he wasn't a baby stuck babysitting, as Jack teased. He'd be back before his mom got home. 3 minutes to Jack's house, half an hour hanging out with the guys, 3 minutes back. Maisie wouldn't even notice he'd been gone. But Jack wasn't home. None of the guys were at the place they'd agreed upon. Frustrated, Elliot headed back sooner than planned. When he jumped over the backyard fence, the late afternoon sun blinded him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he first noticed the silence. No humming, no child talking to her doll. "Maisie?" Nothing. "Maisie, come on, let's play now." The garden was empty. The back door, which he'd left shut, was ajar. "Maisie, this isn't time to hide." He checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room, her room, with pale yellow walls and star stickers on the ceiling. Nothing. He ran outside again, desperate, calling her name. He checked the neighbor's house, Mrs. Peterson's, who loved Maisie and always gave her cookies. Maisie wasn't there. He ran 3 blocks to the small park, no sign of Maisie. When his mother arrived an hour later, she found Elliot on the front steps, pale-faced, trembling hands. The police were already on their way. "What happened, Elliot? Where's your sister?" How to tell the truth. How to explain that he left her alone for, how long, 20 minutes, 30? How to admit he broke the only promise that really mattered. I turned my back for a second, Mom, just a second." The rest of that day blurred. Cops asking questions, neighbors forming search parties, his mother collapsing on the sofa hugging a photo of Maisie, his father rushing home, his disbelieving look turning into something Elliot would never forget. They never found her. No clues, no witnesses. It was as if Maisie had turned to air, vanished in the space between one thought and another. The only thing left behind was the bald doll, found near the back fence, lying in the dirt, as if dropped during a run or an abduction. The same doll she'd received on her 3rd birthday. The same one Elliot had helped stitch her name onto, guiding her small fingers in the shaky letters, M-A-I-S-I-E. Elliot blinked, returning to the present. The shell in his hand had broken, its sharp edge cutting into his palm. A thin line of blood dripped between his fingers, but he barely felt the pain. The guilt had never left him. Even after his parents died, his father from a heart attack 5 years after Maisie's disappearance, his mother from cancer 3 years later, Elliot still carried the weight. If he hadn't left, if he had stayed with her, if he had done his only job that day. And now 3 decades later, a 4-year-old girl appeared with the same doll, the same name stitched in the same childlike letters. Coincidence? It had to be. But something inside him, something beyond reason, screamed that there was more. He picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. "Janet, I need you to find everything you can about a woman named Margot Leary. She passed away recently. Left a 4-year-old daughter named Lila at the orphanage next to our factory in Somerset. Of course, sir. Any specific information you're looking for? Elliot hesitated. How could he explain? How to say he was chasing a ghost? An impossibility. I want everything about her. Her background, family, where she lived. And one more thing, Janet. Total discretion. Understood. I'll get right on it. Elliot hung up and looked at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in a perfect line. Maisie, he whispered to the wind, for the first time in decades. The name came out like a prayer, a question, a plea for forgiveness. Is it you? An old wound had opened again. But this time, along with the pain, there was something Elliot hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Elliot couldn't sleep that night. His apartment, normally a refuge of ordered silence, seemed to suffocate him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the doll in Lila's arms, saw the stitched name, saw possibilities that until 2 days ago had never occurred to him. At 4:30 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He got dressed and went to his home office, not the large corporate one downtown, but the small study in his apartment, used only on the rare occasions he brought work home. He turned on his computer and began to search. At 6 in the morning, when Janet arrived at the main office, Elliot was already there, waiting for her. "Janet, I need a favor." His voice was calm, but there was an urgency she had never heard before. "Cancel my appointments for the next 2 days." She raised her eyebrows but nodded. "Very well. Is there a problem, sir?" "No? An opportunity, perhaps." He hesitated. "I also need you to get in touch with Daryl Mercer, the private investigator. It's been years since we last contacted him." "Exactly." Janet studied him for a moment. In 8 years of working together, she had learned to read Elliot's micro-signals, the faint crease in his brow, the almost imperceptible tension at the corners of his mouth. She had never seen him like this. "I'll call him today. Should I mention the subject?" "Just say it's personal." "And Janet, this stays between us. No one else should know." "Understood, sir." Elliot went back to Somerset that afternoon. This time, he took his personal car instead of the company limo. He parked a block away from the orphanage, watching the activity. Children played in the yard under the supervision of 2 adults. He scanned the scene until he finally spotted Lila, sitting alone on a bench, the bald doll in her lap. Even from a distance, Elliot noticed how she seemed apart from the other kids, not excluded, but existing in her own space. He took a deep breath and walked up to the gate. The security guard recognized him immediately. "Mr. Vance, we weren't expecting you today." "I came to check on the repairs," he said casually, "and maybe talk to Mrs. Hollis, if she's available." Of course. I'll let her know you're here." While he waited, Elliot observed Lila more closely. There was something in her gestures, in the way she tilted her head when talking to the doll, that triggered painful echoes in his memory. Or was his mind seeking patterns where none existed? Margaret Hollis greeted him with a genuinely warm smile. "Mr. Vance, what a pleasant surprise. The repairs are almost finished, thanks to your generosity. I wanted to see the progress for myself," he replied, forcing a natural tone in his voice. "And also, I'd like to discuss another matter." Margaret's expression turned curious, but remained friendly. "Of course, let's go to my office." The office was small but welcoming. Photos of children over the years decorated the walls, smiling faces, lives in transition. Elliot wondered how many stories those walls had witnessed. "How can I help you, Mr. Vance?" He decided to be direct. "I'd like to know more about Lila, the girl I met on my last visit." Margaret seemed slightly surprised. "Lila? She certainly made an impression on you." "She reminded me of someone," Elliot said, choosing his words carefully. "And I got curious about her story. You mentioned she lost her mother recently." "Yes, a sad situation. Margot Leary had been ill for some time, terminal cancer. She brought Lila here about a month before she passed. Wanted to make sure her daughter was settled and safe. Do you have records of her, of the mother?" Margaret tilted her head, intrigued by his sudden interest. "We have the basics. Would you like to see them?" "If it's not a problem." Elliot tried to sound casual, but his heart was racing. Normally they're confidential, but given your recent generosity and the fact you're considering a support program for our children, she smiled and opened a drawer. I have the file right here. I was just reviewing it, actually. Elliot took the thin folder with hands he hoped weren't visibly trembling. He opened it and examined the contents. An admission form, basic medical records for Lila, a copy of her birth certificate, and a legal document signed by Margot, transferring Lila's guardianship to the orphanage. Not much to go on, as you can see, said Margaret. Margot was quite private about her past. Is there a photo of her? Just this one. Margaret pulled out a small, slightly faded photograph. A young woman, around 30, with dark hair and large eyes that seemed unsettlingly familiar. Elliot felt a tightness in his chest. It's a striking resemblance, Margaret murmured. What do you mean? Elliot looked at her in surprise. To Lila, the same eyes, the same serious expression. Margot looked older than she was because of her illness, but you can clearly see the similarity. Elliot continued staring at the photo, searching perhaps desperately for traces of the little sister he'd known. But 3 decades had passed. How do you recognize a 5-year-old in the face of a grown woman? Any information about Margot's family? Parents? Siblings? Margaret shook her head. Very little. She mentioned growing up in the foster system, got adopted at 7 by a family in Connecticut, but she didn't talk much about it. Elliot felt a spark of hope. The timing fit. Maisie had been 5 when she disappeared. If she'd been found and placed for adoption, do you know the name of the adoptive family? Leary, I assume, since that was her surname, but I'm not sure. As I said, Margot was private about her past. Elliot closed the folder, trying to order his tumultuous thoughts. And Lila? How is she coping with all this? As well as can be expected, she's a remarkably resilient child. Quiet, but observant. She spends a lot of time with that doll. The doll, Elliot hesitated. Did Margot mention anything about it? Only that it was special, a family heirloom from what I understand. Margaret smiled kindly. Children often cling to objects when going through trauma. They're anchors of stability. Could I speak with Lila? Margaret glanced at her watch. She should be in the yard right now. We usually don't encourage unscheduled visits, but given the circumstances, and please, just be mindful. She's still processing a lot. Of course. Margaret led him to the yard. Lila was still on the same bench, quietly talking to her doll. Lila, Margaret called softly. Do you remember Mr. Vance? He'd like to talk to you for a bit. The girl lifted her gaze, her large eyes fixed on Elliot with that disconcerting intensity. You're the man who got sad about Maisie, she said, her small voice clear. Elliot felt the ground shift beneath him. How did she know? May I sit with you for a while? He asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Lila nodded, scooting over slightly to make room on the bench. Margaret, after a moment's hesitation, stepped away, giving them some privacy while still staying in sight. That's a very special doll you have, said Elliot, sitting down. It belonged to my mother. And before that, to my mother's mother. Lila adjusted the ball doll in her lap. It's magic. Magic. My mom said it protects people who are lost. Elliot swallowed hard. Each word from the girl felt loaded with meanings she herself couldn't possibly understand. Did your mother talk a lot about the doll? Sometimes. When she was sad. Lila looked at the doll. She would cry looking at Maisie. I asked why, but she'd say it was just remembering. Remembering what? When she was as little as me. Lila tilted her head, as if trying to recall something specific. She said she didn't really remember being a baby, but she remembered the doll. That the doll remembered for her. Elliot felt a knot in his throat. Every sentence was a piece of a puzzle he wasn't sure he had the courage to assemble. Lila, did your mum leave anything else for you, besides the doll? The girl nodded. A notebook with drawings and letters for when I grow up. Mrs. Hollis is keeping them for me. Have you seen the drawings? Yes. I like to look at them before I sleep. Do you remember any particular drawing? Lila thought for a moment. There's one with a little girl and a big boy eating porridge. The girl is holding Maisie. My mom said it was a special memory. Elliot's heart nearly stopped. Porridge. The Sunday ritual he had with Maisie when they were kids. He'd make porridge with cinnamon, the way their mother did, and they'd eat together at the kitchen table before their parents woke up. Lila, do you think maybe I could see that notebook sometime? She studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to look right through his careful facade. I think so. You look as sad as my mom did. Maybe the drawings can help you too. Elliot didn't know what to say. He thanked her with a nod and stood, his legs strangely unsteady. Thank you for talking with me, Lila. She just nodded, turning her attention back to the doll. On the way back to Margaret's office, Elliot felt as if he was teetering on the edge of a cliff. The implications of what he was uncovering were too big to handle all at once. She's a remarkable child, isn't she? Margaret commented when they returned to her office. Yes, she is. Elliot hesitated. Mrs. Hollis. Lila mentioned a notebook with drawings that belonged to her mother. Oh yes, it's one of the few personal items Margot left for her. Lila often flips through it before bedtime. Would it be possible, ma'am, for me to see it? Margaret frowned. Well, we generally don't allow access to the children's personal belongings, but if Lila agrees, I understand. I respect that. Elliot adjusted his approach. Actually, I have another question. You mentioned Margot was adopted. Are there any records of that? Anything about her life before adoption? Not here. She didn't provide many details, just that she was adopted around 7 years old and that her original name was legally changed, something common in some adoptions back then. A changed name, sealed records, 7 years old, 2 years after Maisie disappeared. The timeline fit. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Hollis. She'll be in touch about the repairs. Elliot left the orphanage with his mind spinning. In the car, he called Janet immediately. Can Daryl Mercer meet me today? Yes, sir. He's free at 5. Same place as always. Perfect. Mercer was the kind of man who disappeared in a crowd. Average height, unremarkable appearance, discreet clothing. It was his greatest advantage as a private investigator. He waited for Elliot at a corner table in a quiet cafe, where they usually met for company business requiring discretion. Mr. Vance, Mercer waved when Elliot approached. Long time no see. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice, Mercer shrugged. You've always been prompt with payments. So, Keyworks, what can I do for you today? Elliot took a deep breath. I need you to investigate someone. Margot Leary, recently deceased. She lived near Somerset. I want everything. Background, adoption records, her life before adoption, everything you can find. Mercer wrote the name in his notebook. Any context that might help. Elliot hesitated. How much should he share? She was adopted around 1997 or 1998 at age 7. Her new name was sealed in the records. Mercer looked up with renewed curiosity. Sounds personal, Mr. Vance, more than usual. It is personal, extremely personal, and confidential. Understood. Mercer finished taking notes. Anything else? Any detail helps, sir. Elliot thought of the doll, the stitched name, the porridge drawing he hadn't seen but that Lila described. She had a 4-year-old daughter named Lila and a rag doll, bald, with the name Maisie stitched on its belly. The doll is important. Mercer lifted his eyes from the notepad. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He had worked for Elliot long enough to know rumors about the Vance family tragedy. I see, was all he said. When do you need this? Yesterday. I'll do my best. I'll likely have preliminary info in 48 hours. Elliot nodded and stood. Use any resources you need. Money is no object. Mercer watched him with guarded curiosity. May I ask a bold question, Mr. Vance? Go ahead. What are you hoping to find? Elliot looked out the cafe window. Outside, the world continued its normal pace, oblivious to the emotional earthquake he was experiencing. Something I lost a long time ago, he answered at last. Or the ghost of something I can never get back. Over the next 3 days, Elliot buried himself in work, trying to distract himself from the agonizing weight. The hours dragged. Every time his phone rang, his heart raced, only to deflate when it wasn't Mercer. On Wednesday, finally, the investigator called. I've got something. Not everything, but it's significant. My office in 1 hour. When Mercer arrived, he brought a thick folder, much more substantial than Elliot had expected. I found more than I anticipated, the investigator explained. Margot Leary was indeed adopted in 1997 at age 7. Her original name was legally changed as part of the process. What was the name? Elliot barely got the words out, tension knotting his throat. Mercer opened the folder and slid a document toward Elliot, a partially redacted adoption record, but one line stood out clearly. Original name of the minor, Mason Melissa Ann. Melissa, Elliot murmured. Not Maisie. Maisie could have been a nickname, Mercer pointed out, or just a coincidence. And the birth parents? Here's the interesting part. They're not listed. She was found at 5 years old in 1995, wandering alone at a train station in New Haven. She didn't know her last name, just her first. No ID, no accompanying adult. She was placed in the foster system after 2 years without anyone claiming her. 1995, the year Maisie disappeared. Was there a doll with her when they found her? Mercer flipped through a few pages. Yes, it's on the list of personal belongings. One rag doll, no hair, faded pink dress, and the name stitched on it. Not mentioned in the report. But Mercer pulled out another document, a scanned photo from an old file. The quality was poor, but it showed a small child in a hospital or institution setting, holding what looked like a bald doll. There's more, Mercer added, handing over another paper. I found this in the Connecticut Social Services archives, a drawing made by Melissa during her time in the first temporary foster home. Elliot took the paper with shaking hands. It was a simple child's drawing, 2 figures, one big and one small, sitting at a table with bowls in front of them. The smaller figure clutched something to her chest, a doll, and across the top, in big clumsy letters, Eli and me eating Eli. It sounded like the nickname Maisie used for him, but it could be a coincidence, a common abbreviation. The world seemed to tilt around him. The doubts hadn't vanished, but they now mingled with a hope that hurt his chest. The coincidences were too many to ignore, yet still not enough to be certain. What else do you have? He asked Mercer, his voice uneven. Some medical records. The girl found Melissa had a small crescent-shaped scar on her right wrist. Mercer looked at him. Mean anything? Elliot felt a chill. Maisie had a scar like that, from falling off her bike at age 4. Another coincidence? Perhaps, he replied, keeping his voice controlled. It still seems possible. There's a surefire way to confirm, Mercer suggested. A DNA test between you and Lila. If Margot was truly your sister. Yes, Elliot slowly closed the folder. But I need more proof first. I can't just show up asking for a DNA sample from an orphaned child without raising questions. Elliot's mind was racing. So many scattered fragments pointing in the same direction. The identical doll, the stitched name, the scar, the drawing of porridge, the matching dates, yet nothing definitive. Could Margot Leary really have been Maisie? If so, that would make Lila his niece. Or was he just desperately imposing meaning on coincidences? Keep digging, he told Mercer. I want every scrap of information about Margot Leary and her past, and... He hesitated. Keep a discreet eye on Lila. I want to make sure she's okay while we figure out the truth. The truth, whatever it was, Elliot knew he had to find it, even if it meant reopening wounds that had never fully healed. The orphanage courtyard was busier than usual that Thursday afternoon. A local school had organized a small children's book fair, and volunteers were setting up bright tables stacked with illustrated stories. Elliot observed from afar, leaning against his car, feeling oddly hesitant. In the past 2 weeks, he had established a routine that Janet considered at least curious. 3 times a week, unfailingly, he cancelled late afternoon appointments for personal matters. These matters always took him to the same place, the orphanage in Somerset. Mrs. Hollis was already waiting at the entrance. Her smile was genuinely warm, no longer tinged with the nervousness that usually accompanied Elliot's presence in other contexts. Mr. Vance, good to see you again. Lila just got back from school. School. A detail he'd learned during previous visits. Even living in the orphanage, Lila attended a regular public school nearby. Normalcy wherever possible. That was the institution's philosophy. "Thanks for allowing my visits," Elliot said, handing her a package. "I brought some books for the library here." It was only half an excuse. The books were indeed for the library, but he'd picked each one specifically with Lila in mind. "How kind of you." Margaret took the package. "Your attention has been good for her. You know, she asks when you're coming back." Something warm stirred in Elliot's chest. He tried not to show how much it affected him. "Where can I find her?" "She's in the art room today. It's painting day." Elliot found Lila sitting alone at a small table, focused on a sheet of paper. Next to her, as always, sat the bald doll, watching in silence. In her small hand, a blue crayon moved with surprising precision for a 4-year-old. "Hello, Lila." She lifted her eyes. She didn't smile, she almost never did, but her gaze lit up in a way he was beginning to recognize. "You came back. I promised I would, didn't I?" He sat in the tiny chair across from her. "What are you drawing?" "A dream." She slid the paper toward him. "It's a house with big windows. There's a swing on the tree." Elliot studied the picture. For such a small child, there was surprising detail. The house had curtains, there were flowers in the yard, and a small figure on the swing. "Who's that on the swing?" "That's me," Lila explained seriously. "Or maybe my mom when she was little. Sometimes I get confused." Lila's disconcerting honesty always caught him off guard. She talked about complex feelings with a clarity most adults lacked. "Do you dream about your mom often?" Lila picked up another crayon, red this time, and began drawing a flower. "Almost every night. Sometimes she sings a song with no words, just melody." She looked up. "Can you sing?" Elliot almost laughed at the unexpected question. "Not very well. My mom used to say I scared the birds away whenever I tried." That made Lila smile, a small smile that appeared and disappeared quickly, like a fish breaching the water's surface. "My mom sang softly. She said she learned it from someone special, but didn't remember who." Elliot felt his heart quicken. His mom, the mother he and Maisie shared, used to sing to them at bedtime, a melody without words, improvised, changing each night but keeping the same comforting feeling. "What kinds of things do you like to do, Lila?" he asked, trying not to sound too eager. They talked for nearly an hour. Elliot learned that Lila liked to draw with crayons. Colored pencils are too light. That her favorite sandwich was grilled cheese. That she had a secret spot in the backyard where she talked to ants. Simple, childish, precious details. On his third visit that week, Elliot brought a small gift, a set of new crayons, with colors not available in the orphanage's communal collection. "Gold!" Lila exclaimed, carefully picking up one of the crayons with near reverence. "Now I can make real stars." They sat in the yard that afternoon. There was something natural now in how they interacted. A shared rhythm, a mutual language. Lila drew while Elliot told stories. Simple stories about his work, about places he'd traveled, about a dog he'd had as a boy. He never spoke directly of Maisie, but sometimes let slip small fragments. A game they played, a picnic in the park. "Did you have a sister?" Lila asked suddenly, without taking her eyes off her drawing. The question caught him off guard. "Why do you think that?" "Because of how you talk. Like there's a hole in your stories." Elliot stayed quiet for a moment. "Yes, I did. A long time ago." "Where is she now?" "I don't know. She left when she was little." Lila nodded, as if that made perfect sense in her world. "My mom left too, but she told me about her brother who made cinnamon porridge on Sundays." Lila began to pretend brush the doll's imaginary hair with her fingers. "She said it was the best porridge ever, but she couldn't replicate it because it was missing a secret ingredient." Elliot felt the air leave his lungs. Cinnamon porridge, Sundays. The secret ingredient was just love, a joke he used to make Maisie laugh. That was when he noticed a loose strand of Lila's hair stuck to the sleeve of his jacket. Thin, dark brown, shimmering against the navy blue fabric, almost invisible. Before he fully realized what he was doing, he carefully removed it, and when Lila became distracted by a passing beetle, he folded it into a small piece of paper, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. That night, in the silence of his apartment, he looked at the strand of hair now kept in a tiny envelope. The doubt gnawed at him. The similarities were too strong, the coincidences too unlikely. But what if it was all his imagination? What if he was seeing what he desperately wanted to see? Early the next morning, he called a private lab, the kind of discreet and expensive place that asked no questions. He personally delivered the envelope with the strand of hair and his own sample, a swab of cells from his cheek. "How long does it take?" he asked the technician. "For a kinship analysis, 3 to 5 business days." 5 days, an eternity. He continued his visits to the orphanage. Each new conversation with Lila revealed more fragments, more pieces of a puzzle. He still wasn't sure he had the courage to piece together. "I dreamed of that house again," Lila said one rainy afternoon while they played with blocks in the common room. "But there was a tall boy there too. He gave me piggyback rides like a horse." "A boy you know?" "No, but he had eyes like yours." She looked at Elliot with that intense gaze. "My mum said he grew up and left, but maybe he'd come back someday." Elliot swallowed hard. On his last visit before the results came back, he found Lila quieter than usual. She clutched the doll against her chest as if seeking comfort. "Everything okay, Lila?" She shook her head. "I dreamed my mum was looking for me but couldn't find me." He sat beside her, hesitating for a moment before placing a hand gently on her small shoulder. "You know, sometimes dreams aren't just dreams. Sometimes they're ways we remember the people we love." Lila looked up at him, her big eyes shining with unshed tears. "You think she's still looking for me even though she's in heaven?" "I'm sure she is, and maybe," he paused, choosing his words, "maybe she sent other people to find you." Lila seemed to consider that seriously. Then, in a gesture that completely surprised Elliot, she held out the doll toward him. "Do you want to hold Maisie for a bit? My mum said she helps when we're sad." Elliot took the doll with trembling hands, the worn cloth, the faded dress, the stitched name. It was exactly as he remembered. "Thank you, Lila. That means a lot to me." As he held the doll, his phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from the lab. "Results available for pickup." Past and present seemed to stitch themselves together before his eyes. But Elliot, as much as he wanted answers, knew he needed to be careful, for Lila's sake and his own. Some truths, even when found, have to be handled delicately, like invisible threads that, if pulled too fast, might snap forever. The envelope with the genetic test results felt like lead in Elliot's jacket pocket. He had carried it for 3 days, still sealed. Something held him back from opening it. Maybe fear. Maybe the strange sense that once the truth was confirmed, there'd be no turning back. On that rainy Friday morning, he drove to the orphanage earlier than usual. The repairs to the dining hall were completely finished, and he had organized a small celebration for the children. Nothing flashy, just a special breakfast with pancakes and fresh fruit. A good excuse for his frequent visits, so no one would question them too much. Margaret Hollis met him at the entrance, sheltering under a colorful umbrella. "Mr. Vance, right on time." The kids are very excited about breakfast. The dining hall was decorated with simple balloons. Children of various ages sat at the tables, chatting excitedly while staff served pancakes. Elliot immediately looked for Lila, spotting her in a distant corner, as usual, with the doll in her lap. "She seems to like the pancakes," Elliot noted, standing beside Margaret, who was watching the kids with evident satisfaction. "It's the first time I've seen her eat with such enthusiasm." The director smiled. "Your interest in her has really helped, you know. She's more talkative, and she's even made a friend, the boy with glasses next to her." Elliot felt a wave of relief. The past few weeks had been intense, and he sometimes wondered if his presence in Lila's life was helping or making things more complicated. "Actually, Mr. Vance," Margaret continued in a lowered voice, "there's something I want to show you. Could you come to my office after the children finish eating?" The sudden seriousness in her voice caught Elliot's attention. "Is something wrong?" "No, not at all. We just found something that might interest you given your involvement with Lila." The wait felt endless. Elliot mingled among the tables, speaking briefly with some kids, praising their drawings, answering curious questions about being rich. When he finally got a moment with Lila, she seemed unusually cheerful. "Thanks for the pancakes," she said, syrup smudged at the corner of her mouth. "Maisie liked them too." Elliot smiled, gently wiping the syrup away with a napkin. "I'm glad you both liked them. Are you staying for recess?" "Not sure. Mrs. Hollis wants to talk to me after this." Lila frowned, thinking hard. "She must want to show you the envelope." Elliot felt a chill. "What envelope?" "The one she found yesterday while tidying the cabinet. She said it had some of my mum's things in it." Before he could ask more, an assistant called the children to leave the dining hall. Lila walked off, waving shyly at Elliot. Margaret was waiting in the hallway. "Let's go to my office, Mr. Vance." The small office was tidier than usual. Margaret gestured for him to sit in the chair across from the desk, then sat down herself, clasping her hands over a brown envelope. "Yesterday, while organizing files, we found this among the things Margot Leary left for Lila." She slid the envelope toward Elliot. "Normally we'd keep it for when Lila's older, but given your interest in her, I thought you should see it." Elliot took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. "What is it?" "Open it," Margaret said kindly. "I think you'll understand." Carefully, Elliot opened the envelope. Inside was a single item, a 4:6 photograph, slightly faded at the edges. As he pulled it out, he felt the air leave his lungs. The photo showed a young woman, maybe 30, with wavy brown hair that fell over her shoulders, hugging a small girl, undeniably Lila, perhaps no older than 3. The bald doll was clutched between them. Both were smiling at the camera, the woman's smile wide and bright, the girl's smile timid but recognizable. But that wasn't what made his heart nearly stop. It was the woman's face, the shape of her chin, the gentle slope of her nose, how her eyes narrowed when she smiled, so painfully familiar. And those eyes, they were the same eyes he saw every morning in the mirror, the Vance eyes. "Lila often mentions how much she resembles her mom," Margaret said. "But looking at this photo, I noticed something else." She paused. "The resemblance between Margot and you." Elliot couldn't even speak. His eyes were locked on the image, absorbing every detail. Margot, no, Maisie, looked healthy in the photo, her face full of life, no sign of the illness that would take her soon after. She wore a simple necklace with a small star-shaped pendant. Elliot recognized it immediately. He'd given Maisie a similar pendant for her last birthday together. "Mr. Vance?" Margaret's voice sounded distant. "Are you all right?" He tried to speak, but his throat was tight with emotion. This was no longer the vague memory of a lost child. It was a grown woman, real and tangible, who had lived a full life he knew nothing about, who had had a daughter, who had kept, somehow, the same doll she'd clutched on the day she vanished. "She is," Elliot finally said, voice quivering. "She looked so much like someone I knew." Margaret watched him closely. "When you first came here, I thought your interest in Lila was just charity. Then I suspected something more personal. Now, seeing your reaction," she chose her words carefully. "Mr. Vance, did you know Margot Leary?" The question hung in the air, simple yet impossible to answer in a few words. "I did, yes." Elliot took a long breath. "A very long time ago, when she went by a different name." Margaret nodded slowly, as though she were finally seeing the full picture. "Does Lila know?" Elliot looked at the photo again. The truth was now undeniable, concrete, gripping him by the chest. This wasn't just a suspicion or a hopeful theory built on coincidences. It was real. The woman in the photo was Maisie. His sister had survived, grown up, become a mother. And while he had spent decades building a financial empire to fill the void of her absence, she'd been somewhere else, trying, perhaps, to recall who she was and where she came from. "Not yet," he finally said. "I need time to process." Margaret understood. "The photo belongs to Lila, of course. But I thought you might like a copy. I'd appreciate that very much." Back in his car, Elliot finally opened the envelope with the DNA test results. The scientific confirmation was there in clinical terms and percentages. an undeniable genetic link, but in some way, it felt secondary now. The true proof was the face in the photograph, the star-shaped pendant, the same eyes he carried in his own reflection. Maisie hadn't just survived, she'd lived. She'd grown up, loved, and become a mother. All those years, while he tried in vain to fill the emptiness with business deals, she'd been out there, perhaps trying to remember who she was. Sitting in his car under the pounding rain, Elliot allowed himself something he hadn't done since his parents' funerals. He wept. Silent tears at first, then deep sobs from a raw, broken place within him. Tears of grief for the sister he had lost twice. Tears of relief for finally knowing. Tears of hope for the little girl with big eyes who carried Vance's blood. When he finally calmed, he looked again at the photo. He brushed his fingers over the face of adult Maisie, trying to reconcile this image with the 5-year-old in his memories. "I found you," he whispered. "Too late. But I found you." Carefully stowing the photo, Elliot made a decision. The past could not be changed, but the future was still unwritten. He would do everything in his power to ensure Lila never felt the same emptiness he had carried for decades. His niece, Maisie's daughter, a piece of the puzzle he'd never expected to find. The week following the discovery of the photograph passed in a blur for Elliot. In every quiet moment, the image of adult Maisie haunted him. Not the lost child frozen in his memory, but a grown woman who had lived, loved, become a mother. A whole life he knew nothing about. In an effort to fill that void, Elliot reorganized his schedule. "Janet, I need my afternoons free for the next few weeks," he informed his assistant, who simply nodded, now used to her boss's new routine. That Wednesday, he arrived at the orphanage with a small parcel wrapped in plain paper. Mrs. Hollis greeted him with a welcoming smile. "Lila's in the garden. Since you started visiting, she waits for you every day." A warm feeling spread through his chest. He found the girl sitting under a tree, quietly talking to the bald doll. "Hello, Lila." She looked up. Her lips didn't curve into a smile, but something in her eyes sparkled in that way he was learning to recognize as joy. "Did you bring a story today?" Elliot settled beside her. "Actually, I brought this." He handed over the small package. Lila opened it carefully, revealing a children's picture book with a bright cover showing a girl and her teddy bear on an adventure. "Can we read it together?" he asked. "My mom used to read to me every night," Lila said, running her fingers reverently over the cover. Then, seriously, "You have to show the pictures first and do different voices for each character." Elliot nodded just as seriously. "Teach me how she did it." Lila placed the doll between them, scooted closer, and pointed to the first page. As Elliot read, following her instructions meticulously, she gradually leaned in until she was resting against him. It was the first time she initiated physical closeness. At that moment, looking at this child who trusted him, Elliot felt the weight of responsibility. She was a part of Maisie, part of him. A thread of life that, through some improbable miracle, had returned to his orbit. In the days that followed, they fell into a routine. Elliot visited Lila every afternoon, bringing short stories, sharing small moments, drawing together, building block castles, or simply chatting about her day. "You had a sister?" Lila asked one afternoon as they colored. The question caught him off guard yet again. "How do you know? By the way you tell stories, it feels like someone's missing." Elliot hesitated. "Yes, I did. A long time ago. Where is she now?" "I don't know. She left when she was very young." Lila nodded, as though the logic made perfect sense. "My mom used to talk about her brother sometimes. The one who made cinnamon porridge on Sundays." Lila hugged the doll tighter. "She said his porridge had a secret ingredient she never could figure out." Elliot felt the air leave his lungs. The secret ingredient had always been a private joke. "It's love," he'd say, making Maisie laugh. On a rainy afternoon, while reading in the small library sofa, Lila fell asleep leaning against him, the doll clutched to her chest. Margaret passed by the doorway and paused, smiling at the scene. "First time I've seen her sleep so peacefully since she arrived," she whispered. Elliot remained still, watching Lila's serene face. An internal dilemma gnawed at him. What to tell her? When? How do you explain to a 4-year-old that her mother was actually his lost sister, that he was her only living relative? "Mr. Vance," Margaret said softly as she carried Lila off to bed. "I'm not sure what your connection to her is, but I see how much you care. More importantly, I see how she responds to you." She paused meaningfully. "We can always discuss more in permanent arrangements, whenever you're ready." The words hung between them, laden with possibilities Elliot wasn't yet ready to name. Back in his apartment, Elliot gazed at the photo of Maisie and Lila that now sat on his bedside table. That image of his sister, no longer the frozen memory of a child but an adult woman, a mother, with a life he had never known, continued to shake him to his core. On his desk, he found a note from Janet. "Keller Lab called. Results ready for pickup tomorrow. The DNA test." A confirmation that now seemed almost unnecessary after the photo, but perhaps it was the final push he needed for permanent decisions. "This time I won't fail you, Maisie," he whispered to the picture. "I'll take care of her. I promise." The pain of loss was slowly transforming into something else, a purpose, a new responsibility, the chance to love what remained. The envelope from the lab sat on Elliot's desk for nearly an hour before he mustered the courage to open it. Despite the photo dispelling most doubts, part of him needed the final scientific seal, numbers, data, absolute certainty. When he finally tore it open, the words jumped from the page with undeniable clarity. Genetic compatibility consistent with uncle-niece relationship. Probability 99.87%. Elliot closed his eyes. It was real. All of it. Maisie had indeed been found, grown up under a new name, had a daughter. Now, that daughter, this 4-year-old child with wise eyes, was alone in the world, or perhaps not so alone anymore. He called Janet, "Cancel my appointments this afternoon, and schedule a meeting with the legal department tomorrow morning." A decision was taking shape inside him, not fully articulated yet, but growing every minute. First, however, he needed something more important than any legal consultation. He needed Lila's own answer. At the orphanage, Mrs. Hollis greeted him with a warm smile. "She was asking if you'd come today." "Actually," Elliot said, "I'd like to request a special permission. There's a small park a couple blocks from here. I was thinking of taking Lila out for a walk, if that's allowed." Margaret looked slightly surprised, then nodded. "Of course, the fresh air will do her good. We just need a bit of paperwork since it's off-site." While Elliot filled out the forms, Margaret watched him with curiosity. "You know," she finally said, "in all my years running the orphanage, I've rarely seen an adult connect so quickly with a child, and vice versa." Elliot smiled, unsure how to respond. There was so much he couldn't say yet, about blood ties, missing names, disrupted lives coming together again. "Lila is special," was all he managed. "Yes, she is." Margaret tilted her head. "Did you get the results you were waiting for?" The question took him by surprise. He had never mentioned the DNA test. "How?" "I've worked with children for decades, Mr. Vance. I've learned to see when there's more to the story than what's being said." She smiled gently. "I'm not asking for details. I just hope you found what you were looking for." "I did," Elliot answered, feeling the powerful simplicity of that truth. Lila was in the activity room, intently drawing as usual. The ball doll perched beside her, propped against a pencil holder. "Lila," Margaret called softly, "look who's here, and he has a surprise." The girl looked up, that familiar spark lighting her gaze. "What surprise?" Elliot approached, crouching down to her eye level. "I thought we could go for a walk. There's a park nearby, if you'd like to go, of course." "Can Maisie come too?" she asked, pointing to the doll. "Of course. We wouldn't leave her behind." Lila nodded seriously and began putting her crayons away in a methodical manner. Elliot noticed how she neatly organized everything before standing up, a meticulousness that matched his own, a trait passed through blood. The park was only a short walk from the orphanage. It was simple, some benches, Tall trees with leaves turning gold and orange in the autumn. A small playground with swings and a slide. Nothing extraordinary, but in the late afternoon light filtering through the leaves, it had a peaceful beauty. Lila walked slowly beside Elliot, taking everything in with her observant eyes. She carried the doll in one arm and, to his surprise, slipped her free hand into his, as if it were the most natural gesture in the world. "Is it cold or hot in your house?" she asked suddenly. The question startled Elliot. "What do you mean?" "At the orphanage, it gets cold at night, Mrs. Hollis gives us extra blankets, but it's still cold." Lila looked at him with that disarming seriousness. "I wanted to know if your house is cold too." A tightness gripped Elliot's chest. 1,000 answers flitted through his mind about central heating systems, insulated penthouses. But he understood the question went deeper than temperature. "It's warm," he finally said. "It has lots of windows, so the sun comes in during the day, and at night we have cozy blankets." Lila nodded, seeming satisfied. They found a bench beneath a large red maple and sat down. Elliot pulled out a small packet of cookies he'd bought on the way. "Would you like one?" Lila took a cookie with careful politeness, then broke it in half and offered one piece to the doll before nibbling her own. Such an innocent gesture, yet so telling of her kind nature, sharing instinctively, even when she had little to share. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching birds hopping among the dry leaves. There was a quiet comfort there, a connection that didn't need constant talking. Elliot wondered if Maisie and Lila had experienced moments like this, simply existing together, sharing a silence only possible with those who feel safe with each other. "Do birds have houses?" Lila asked suddenly. "They have nests," Elliot explained. "They make them with twigs and leaves. Sort of tiny houses in trees. What about when it rains? They take shelter under the leaves. And in winter, when there aren't any leaves." Elliot smiled. Her curiosity was endless. Many fly somewhere warmer. Others find shelter in hollow tree trunks or sturdier nests. Lila considered this seriously, as if solving a complicated puzzle. "I guess it's nice to be able to fly somewhere warm when it's cold," she concluded finally. More silence. A red leaf drifted down and landed on Lila's lap. She picked it up gently, examining its veins with the same rapt focus she gave everything. "Sir," she said at last, her small voice clear, "are you going to take me away from here?" The question was so direct, so honest, that Elliot felt it physically. There was no sidestepping it, no more postponing. This was the moment, unplanned, unrehearsed, but very real and unavoidable. He got off the bench and knelt in front of her, so their eyes were on the same level. Dry leaves crunched under his knees. A gentle breeze stirred Lila's hair. "If you want to come with me, yes." His words were firm but kind. A promise. A beginning. Lila studied him for a long moment, her big eyes taking in every detail of his face. Then, slowly, a small smile, rare and precious, formed on her lips. "Okay," she said simply, then turned to watch a sparrow that had landed nearby, as if they'd just decided on something as simple as which cookie to eat, not the course of their entire lives. Elliot remained there, absorbing the enormity of that simple moment. This remarkable child, who had already lost so much in 4 short years, had just accepted an entirely new life with the calm wisdom that never ceased to amaze him. On the way back to the orphanage, Lila talked more than usual. She asked if she could bring her drawings, if there were trees near Elliot's house, if he knew how to make hot chocolate like Mrs. Willows, a caretaker at the orphanage, practical, everyday questions about her new life, asked without fear or hesitation, just natural curiosity. When they arrived, Margaret was waiting by the entrance. She noticed the two walking hand in hand, and her expression softened. "Did you have a good walk?" "The best," Elliot replied. "Actually, Mrs. Hollis, I'd like to speak with you in private, if possible." In her office, with Lila in the activity room, Elliot got straight to the point. "I'd like to start the process of obtaining legal guardianship of Lila." Margaret didn't look surprised. "I expected this moment. May I ask your connection to her? I'll have to document it." Elliot took a deep breath. It was time for at least part of the truth. "Margot Leary was my sister. Her original name was Maisie Vance. She disappeared when she was 5, kidnapped. We never found out what happened. Apparently, she grew up in the foster system under a new name, with no clear memories of where she came from. Margaret brought a hand to her mouth. My goodness. This is extraordinary. I know I have genetic proof. Lila is my niece. Does Lila know? Not yet. It's too complicated for a 4-year-old. One day, when she's older, I'll tell her everything. For now, she just needs to know she's not alone. Margaret nodded slowly. That explains the instant bond between you two. Some connections go beyond conscious memory. She took a deep breath, shifting to her professional demeanor. Well, as a direct relative, the process will be simpler. There will still be evaluations and home visits, but, she smiled, I don't see any obstacles. Especially considering how Lila responds to you. How long will it take? A few months for permanent guardianship, but we can arrange temporary custody within weeks, so she can live with you while the process finalizes. Elliot nodded. I'll contact my legal team today. Mr. Vance, Margaret said as he rose to leave. In all these years, I've seen many children come and go. Some stories are painful, others hopeful, but rarely have I seen something that feels so right, like the universe is correcting a mistake. The next morning, Elliot met with Vance Nutrition's legal team. For the first time in years, he chaired a meeting not as the cool-headed CEO, but as a man with a deeply personal mission. I want the best possible process, impeccable. No shortcuts, no pulling strings, everything completely transparent and ethical. This isn't a business acquisition, it's a life. The lawyers, used to Elliot's cold, strategic side, seemed unsettled by his emotional intensity. Janet, by his side, smiled discreetly. For weeks, she had seen the shift in her boss, a man who lived for business, discovering that life existed beyond numbers. That night, alone in his apartment, Elliot picked up the photo of Maisie and Lila again. He ran his fingers over Maisie's face, imagining all the questions he'd never get to ask, all the stories he'd never hear. I'll take care of her, Maisie, he promised softly. Not out of obligation or guilt, out of love. The same love that bound us as children. For the first time in decades, the silence of his apartment didn't feel empty or oppressive. It was filled with possibility, with expectation, with the promise of a future that would include a child's laughter, endless questions, and colorful drawings taped to the walls. A future with Lila. Judge Sanders's office was smaller than Elliot had imagined. None of the theatrical grandeur of movie courtrooms, just a simple, functional space with shelves of legal texts and discreet family photos. It was here that destinies were decided, where lives changed course. Mr. Vance, your petition for legal guardianship is in order, said the judge, a middle-aged man with kind but perceptive eyes. Normally, these proceedings take months, but given the extraordinary circumstances and the positive report from the social worker, we've managed to expedite. Elliot nodded. The last 2 months had been a bureaucratic roller coaster. Assessments, interviews, home visits, apartment modifications to make it suitable for a child. Each signed form brought him closer to Lila, but also intensified the weight of responsibility. Seated beside him, Margaret Hollis wore a discreet smile. She had become an unexpected ally, guiding him through the system, helping prepare Lila for the transition. The final hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m., the judge continued. It'll be brief, mostly procedural. Everything points to approval. Will Lila be present? Elliot asked. Yes. In cases involving children this young, I like to see them in person. Not to question them, just to ensure their well-being. Outside the courtroom, Margaret lightly touched Elliot's arm. Before we go, I have something for you. I found it yesterday, organizing Lila's belongings for the move. She pulled a slightly battered brown envelope from her bag. It was among Margot's personal items. It wasn't in the official inventory because it was hidden in the lining of a jewelry box. Elliot took the envelope gently. There was no address, just the word "for" on the front, with no specific addressee. Did you read it? Margaret shook her head. It doesn't belong to me, but based on the date on the back, it was written shortly before she died. I thought Maybe it was important for you to see it before the hearing." Elliot thanked her with a nod, tucking the envelope into his jacket. Something told him he'd need privacy to read it. That evening, after a final meeting with his lawyers, he finally retrieved the envelope. Sitting by the window of his apartment, the city lights behind him, he opened it with a sense of reverence. Inside was a single sheet of paper, filled with delicate yet firm handwriting. No date, no signature, just words that seemed to flow straight from a heart aware of limited time. "If someday someone finds my daughter, I hope it's a good person. Someone who stays. Someone who looks at her the way I did. I don't have much time, but my love is whole. She deserves a real home. She deserves not to be forgotten. I know there's a world before my memories, a place I can't reach, but I sense it at the edges of dreams. Faces I almost recognize, voices I almost recall. If there's someone from that world looking for me, and they find Lila, know she's the best part of who I became. She has my eyes, but she sees farther than I ever could. She looks at people as if she can see right through them. She always knew when something was true or not. Trust that instinct of hers. Some days she talks about a boy who made porridge and a house with blue windows, things I never told her, but they appear like borrowed memories. Maybe it's just a child's imagination, or maybe it's something deeper, flowing in her blood as it does in mine. Whoever finds this letter, please tell her I was happy, that every moment with her was worth all the ones I lost before, and that love doesn't end when people leave. It just changes shape, like water turning into clouds but still remaining water." Elliot pressed the letter to his chest, silent tears slipping down his face. These were Maisie's words, not written specifically for him, yet they felt like a blessing, a passing of care, a circle closing. Even without full memories, some part of Maisie, Margot, had known there was a before, a lost world that might find her someday. Now, that piece of her past had indeed found her. It had found Lila. "I promise, Maisie," he whispered into the paper, as if his sister could hear him across time and distance. "I'll stay. I'll look at her the way you did." The next morning, Elliot picked Lila up from the orphanage. She wore a simple but pretty dress chosen specifically for the occasion. The ball doll, as always, was firmly clutched in her arms. "Are you nervous?" he asked, adjusting the bow in her hair. Lila considered the question with her usual seriousness. "No," she finally replied. "Just a little curious." At the courthouse, they waited side by side on a polished wooden bench. Lila swung her legs, still too short to reach the floor. She looked around with observant eyes, at the official emblems on the walls, at people in formal attire, at the constant shuffle of papers and hushed conversations. "Is this where people decide important things?" she asked. "Yes," Elliot replied. "Today they'll decide if I can be your legal guardian. That means you'd live with me, and I'd be responsible for you. Like a dad." The simple question hit Elliot square in the chest. "Yes, like a dad." Lila nodded, absorbing the idea. "Does the judge know you make good Sunday porridge?" Elliot smiled, squeezing her small hand. "I think we forgot to mention that part in the paperwork." When they were finally called, the room was nearly empty. Just the judge, a few staff members, Margaret and Elliot's lawyers. A private hearing, shielded from the curiosity that would surely follow news of billionaire Elliot Vance adopting a child. The judge smiled at Lila, introducing himself simply. He asked a few basic questions: if she liked being with Elliot, if she understood she would be living with him permanently, if she had any questions. "Can I bring Maisie?" was her only query, lifting the doll. "Of course," replied the judge kindly. "She's part of the family too." Then he turned to Elliot, requesting final comments. Elliot inhaled deeply, holding Lila's hand. The words he had rehearsed all night suddenly felt stiff. Instead, he spoke from the heart. "Her mother was my sister. She disappeared when I was a boy. I thought I'd lost her forever, but fate had another plan. It brought us back together, through her. I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want to love who's left behind." His voice cracked on the last sentence. From the nearby bench, Margaret discreetly wiped a tear. The judge, visibly moved, nodded slowly. Circumstances that bring families together can be extraordinary, We don't always understand the paths the universe chooses. He looked at Lila, then Elliot. But we do recognize when something is right, and this, clearly, is right. With a simple motion, he signed the guardianship documents. By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant legal guardianship of Lila Ann Leary to Elliot James Vance, with all associated rights and responsibilities. It happened just like that, simple, no fanfare, a bureaucratic moment that changed everything. As they left the courtroom, Lila held Elliot's hand tightly. The autumn sun shone softly over them. A new beginning. "Where are we going now?" she asked. "Home," Elliot replied. She nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. Maybe she didn't fully grasp all the complexities of what had happened, or the improbable twists that led to this moment. But she understood the essential part. Someone had stayed. Someone had chosen to love her. And for a 4-year-old who had already known more loss than many adults, that was all that truly mattered. The sun was setting by the time Elliot parked in the garage of his building. Throughout the drive, Lila had remained silent, gazing out the window with curious eyes. The ball doll rested firmly in her lap, as always. In the small suitcase by her side lay everything she owned: a few clothes, her favorite drawings, a worn-out storybook, 4 years of life, all in one bag. "We're here," Elliot said, trying to sound casual despite his racing heart. One of the doormen approached to help with the luggage. Lila watched intently, still holding Elliot's hand as they walked through the elegant lobby. "It's a very tall building," she said, looking up. "Yes, we live at the top floor." Elliot pressed the elevator button. "You can see the whole city from there." In the elevator, Lila stood on tiptoe to look at the mirror on the wall, studying her own reflection. The image captured the moment perfectly. A small child and a tall man, both wearing the same look of cautious expectation. Finally, they arrived. Elliot hesitated briefly before opening the door. "Welcome to our home." Lila stepped in slowly, taking everything in. The apartment, once decorated with the cold elegance of Elliot's lifestyle, had been subtly transformed. The modern furniture was still there, but now there were splashes of color, throw pillows, a few plants, art with brighter hues, a deliberate effort to make the place less like a design showroom and more like a home. "Do you want to see your room?" Elliot asked after giving her a moment to take it all in. Lila nodded and followed him down the hallway. The door to her room was decorated with her name in colorful letters. Elliot took a deep breath and opened the door. The bedroom he'd prepared for Lila was simple but welcoming. Pale yellow walls, a small bed with a star-patterned comforter, a little table for drawing, and a small bookshelf filled with carefully chosen children's books. Light curtains covered a big window, letting in the evening glow. Lila paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning every detail. Then she slowly walked over to the bed and touched the comforter with her fingertips. "It's soft," she said quietly. "I thought you might like stars," Elliot said. "We can change it if you prefer something else." She shook her head. "I like stars. My mom said they're windows for people who've gone away." Elliot felt a lump in his throat. Those little phrases Lila spoke, fragments of Maisie, echoes through time, still amazed him. "The books are yours too," he said, pointing to the bookshelf. "We can read them all, one by one." Lila walked to the shelf and ran her fingers over the brightly colored spines. Some were classics, others more modern, all chosen for a curious mind like hers. "Can I put my drawings on the wall?" she asked, her voice a bit more confident now. "Of course, we can hang them up tomorrow." The rest of the afternoon passed in small, careful steps. Little questions, cautious answers, delicate territories slowly explored. They ate dinner in the kitchen, a simple meal Elliot had prepared in advance. Afterward, he showed her the rest of the apartment, his own bedroom and office included. "If you need anything at night, just call me," he explained. "My door is never locked." As night came, Lila showed signs of tiring. It had been a day of big changes, and despite her impressive resilience, she was still a small child trying to process a massive shift in her world. The bedtime routine was calm. Elliot had memorized her schedule at the orphanage: bath, brushing teeth, a glass of water on the nightstand. Small details that gave her a sense of security and continuity. When Lila was finally in bed wearing pajamas, Elliot sat on the edge of the mattress and asked, "Would you like me to read you a story?" Lila picked up the bald doll by her side and held it tightly against her chest. "I think she needs a new name," she said, eyeing the doll seriously. The statement caught Elliot off guard. Ever since he'd met her, the doll had been Maisie, the only tangible link to the past, the thread connecting 3 generations. A new name? Why? Lila smoothed the doll's faded dress, thinking, because it's a new life. For me, for her, for you. Her eyes met Elliot's. What do you think suits her? Elliot felt the gravity of her question. It wasn't just about a toy. It was about identity, belonging, transformation. Which name would you like to give her? Lila pondered, her forehead creasing in concentration. Maisie Hart, she finally said, because now she has a home. Something shattered inside Elliot. All the emotions contained throughout the day, the tension of the hearing, the weight of responsibility, the joy tinged with sorrow, converged in that simple moment. He couldn't reply. He just smiled through tear-brimmed eyes and leaned in to kiss her forehead. In that instant, the bald doll was transformed in his mind. No longer just a relic of the past or a reminder of loss and tragedy. It had become a symbol of rebuilding, of continuity, of a circle finally closing. Maisie Hart. 2 hearts stitched back together, through time and distance, through memory and love that persisted even when everything else was lost. The Saturday sun poured through the wide windows, scattering golden pools on the apartment floor. Elliot woke earlier than usual, though he had slept little. Much of the night was spent in a reverent kind of wonder, checking on Lila in her room, then sitting in the armchair in his own, trying to grasp the reality that his life had fundamentally changed in a matter of weeks. During the night, he'd found Lila awake, standing by her window, the doll in her arms. "I can't sleep," she'd said simply. "Do you want warm milk?" Elliot offered. Lila shook her head. "I just wanted to make sure the stars are the same here." Now, in the morning, he was preparing breakfast, trying to recall her preferences observed during his visits to the orphanage. He'd bought all sorts of cereal, different types of milk, and a variety of fruit. He wanted her to feel this was also her home, a place with choices, not just rules. Lila appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in pajamas, hair tousled, doll in one hand. She rubbed her eyes with the other. "Good morning," Elliot greeted with a smile. "Did you sleep well after going back to bed?" She nodded, eyeing the table curiously. "Are these all for me?" she asked, seeing the lineup of cereal boxes. "They're for both of us. You can pick whichever you like." Lila climbed onto a chair, kneeling to see better. Methodically, she examined each box before selecting the simplest, plain cornflakes with no sugar. "That's what we used to eat at home," she explained as Elliot poured the milk. "Mom said the other ones had too much sugar." Elliot smiled, once again struck by the unexpected connection. Maisie had grown up with the same rule, plain cereal during the week, the sweet stuff only as a weekend treat. They ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing slowly. Elliot kept things light, asking her if she liked her new room, if she'd slept well, if she wanted to watch TV later. Ordinary little decisions that built a sense of normalcy. "What are we doing today?" Lila asked when they finished. Elliot had given it some thought. He wanted a quiet first weekend, no big outings or overwhelming activities, just time to settle in. "I thought we'd go to the farmer's market, buy some fresh food, maybe ingredients for a special dinner tomorrow. How does that sound?" Her eyes lit up. "Can I pick the fruit?" "Absolutely. You'll be my official shopping assistant." The street market was a few blocks away, an urban luxury Elliot rarely took advantage of before. They walked hand in hand, Lila carrying Maisie Hart under her other arm. It was a pleasant autumn day, with golden leaves drifting from the trees lining the sidewalk. Lila proved to be a surprisingly decisive shopper. She chose the reddest apples, the perfectly ripe bananas, and the brightest strawberries. At each stall, Elliot noticed how vendors smiled at her, charmed by her serious demeanor. "Do you know how to cook?" she asked as they inspected tomatoes. I know the basics. I'm not a chef, but I can make some decent meals. My mom cooked every day. Lila picked out a particularly red tomato. She said that homemade food has a special ingredient. Love, Elliot suggested, recalling a saying from his own childhood. Lila shook her head. Patience, Elliot laughed, once again surprised by the quiet wisdom emanating from this tiny person. At the cereal stand, she paused, thoughtful. Can we make porridge tomorrow? She asked, her voice soft but hopeful. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. Sunday porridge, the tradition he and Maisie had shared, which she must have somehow continued with Lila, even if she didn't fully remember its origin. Are we having porridge? She repeated, interpreting his silence as uncertainty. He smiled, pushing down the swell of emotion. Of course we are. On the way back, Lila chatted more than usual, pointing out passing dogs, asking about the trees, naming the streets she was learning. Every step they took together built a bit more trust, chipped away a bit more of the walls between them. That afternoon, they began preparing for the Sunday meal. Elliot turned the kitchen into a learning space, placing a stool so Lila could reach the counter, teaching her basic steps. Hold the spoon like this, he showed her, guiding the mixing of pancake batter for the next day's dessert. Gently, like you're rocking a baby. Lila copied his motion, tongue between her teeth in concentration. When the batter was smooth, her face lit up with pride. Now we add the eggs, Elliot said, one at a time, carefully. He helped her crack the first egg, guiding her small hands. For the second, he let her try alone. The egg slipped before reaching the bowl, breaking on the kitchen floor. Lila froze, wide-eyed, staring at the yolk spreading. Her entire body went tense. I'm sorry, she whispered, almost trembling. I'll clean it up, I promise. It was the first time Elliot had seen her genuinely scared since she came to live with him. Her reaction stirred something in his chest. The fear in her eyes hinted at past experiences, maybe not with Maisie, but at some point in her short life. Elliot kept his composure calm. Oh, it's just an egg, he said cheerfully, already grabbing a rag. Happens all the time. He knelt and cleaned the mess without any sign of anger. Lila watched him, still tense. You're not mad? She finally asked, her voice tiny. Elliot looked at her steadily, keeping his tone relaxed. No. Mistakes are part of the recipe. Something in her posture melted. Some stiffness Elliot hadn't even noticed until he saw it dissolve. A soft giggle, almost a sigh of relief, escaped her lips. Next time I'll hold it tighter, she promised. Next time we'll hold it together, Elliot corrected gently. The rest of the afternoon went smoothly. They prepared ingredients for the next morning's porridge, tidied the kitchen, then spent quiet time in the living room, Elliot catching up on a few emails on his tablet while Lila drew on the rug, occasionally showing him her creations. Sunday dawned with a soft light filtering through scattered clouds. Elliot woke to the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. He found Lila already in the kitchen, seated at the table, talking quietly to Maisie Hart. Good morning. Early birds, he greeted. Ready for the special porridge? Lila nodded enthusiastically. She had already set out the bowls. She picked a blue one for Elliot, just like the one he used every morning, and a yellow one for herself. They cooked together, Elliot guiding her through every step, stirring the oats in the hot milk, adding cinnamon at the right moment, slicing bananas with a safe plastic knife. Now, he said once the porridge was almost done, it's time for the secret ingredient. Lila watched as he made a theatrical gesture over the pot, like a magician. What is it? She asked, craning her neck to see. Love, Elliot answered, smiling. It's invisible, but it makes all the difference. She laughed, a clear, genuine laugh that filled the kitchen. It was the first time Elliot had heard such an open laugh from her. Their Sunday breakfast was modest by the standards Elliot had once known. Oat porridge with fresh fruit, buttered toast, freshly squeezed orange juice. But sitting together at the table, morning sunlight painting the walls in gold, it felt like a feast. This is the best porridge, Lila declared between spoonfuls, exactly like Mom's. Her comment warmed Elliot inside. Somehow, without ever tasting the porridge Maisie used to make, he had replicated it. Maybe some flavors lived in blood, passed from brother to sister, from mother to daughter. In the days that followed, a new routine settled over Elliot's once sterile apartment. Early mornings felt natural now, as he prepared breakfast while Lila made her bed like a big girl and picked out her clothes. For the first time in decades, his home was full of morning sounds, small footsteps, endless questions, the noise of cartoons on TV. Enrolling her in a new school was straightforward. Elliot chose one nearby, well-regarded yet unpretentious. He wanted Lila to have as normal a childhood as possible, despite her unusual circumstances. Dropping her off on the first day, he felt an unexpected tightness in his throat, walking back to the car with misty eyes, suddenly understanding the anxiety parents felt everywhere. Weekends became a canvas for new traditions: Sunday porridge, visits to the park when weather allowed, movie sessions at home with popcorn. The apartment gained fresh touches: colorful drawings taped to the fridge, children's books on the coffee table. A vase of fresh flowers Lila insisted they replace weekly. 6 weeks after she arrived, Elliot set up a small garden on the balcony. Nothing fancy, just a few pots of herbs and simple flowers. It became their special project, watering plants together, watching daily growth, celebrating new buds. One sunny afternoon, while tending the balcony garden, Lila suddenly fell quiet, observing Elliot with that intense gaze she sometimes had. He was showing her how to trim dried basil leaves when he sensed the weight of her stare. "Everything okay, Lila?" She bit her lip, thinking, before asking, "Are you my dad now?" The question, so direct yet so loaded, made Elliot pause. In the previous weeks, he had carefully avoided imposing labels. He didn't want Lila to feel like he was replacing Maisie or erasing her memory. He lowered the pruning shears and sat on the small bench, bringing himself to her level. "What do you think?" he asked gently. Lila considered his question with the seriousness she gave to all important matters. "I think yes," she answered at last. "You do things dads do. And you look at me the way my mom did." Elliot felt his heart constrict. He smiled softly, placing his hands on her small shoulders. "I am," he said quietly but firmly. "I'm your mom's brother, but I'm also your dad. Because love chooses where it belongs." Lila seemed to process his words, nodding slowly. Then, in a move that took Elliot by surprise, she stepped forward and hugged him, resting her head on his chest and closing her eyes. It was the first time she had initiated a hug since coming to live with him, a gesture of pure trust and acceptance. In that moment, holding this tiny life in his arms, Elliot understood with crystal clarity. He was no longer trying to rebuild something lost. It wasn't about recovering Maisie or making amends for the past. It was about building a home, a new family, a new man. A man who had finally learned that some wounds never fully heal, but can be stitched together until they become beautiful scars. And as the autumn sun warmed the balcony, father and daughter remained embraced, their two lives bound by more than blood and shared loss, bound by the conscious choice to love what remained. Not all wounds can be healed, but some can be stitched with care until they become beautiful scars. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.